Welcome to No Man's Memory, the war archive, where wars become stories. On paper, the problem seems almost absurdly simple. The United States commands the most powerful navy the world has ever seen. 11 aircraft carrier strike groups, hundreds of warships, thousands of aircraft, and a vast arsenal of missiles capable of striking targets across entire continents. Opposing it, at least at first glance, is a narrow stretch of water only a few dozen kilometers wide. This is the Strait of Hormuz, the thin maritime passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Nearly one-fifth of the world's oil supply flows through this corridor. Tankers moving steadily between the energy fields of the Middle East and the markets of Asia, Europe, and beyond. It is arguably the most economically important shipping lane on Earth. So, the question seems obvious. If a crisis erupts and Iran threatens to close the strait, why can't the United States simply move in and reopen it? After all, the balance of conventional military power is overwhelmingly one-sided. American commanders often remind the world that the United States possesses capabilities no other nation can match. And yet, the reality unfolding in the region tells a very different story. Oil shipments slow to a crawl. Commercial vessels begin to avoid the area entirely. Headlines report mines in the water, drones striking ships, and smoke rising above damaged tankers. Despite overwhelming military strength, the flow of oil through the strait begins to stall. The reason is simple. Controlling the Strait of Hormuz is far harder than it sounds. In fact, almost every difficulty the United States faces there begins with the same thing that makes the strait look so manageable in the first place: its size. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is only about 30 to 40 kilometers wide. On a map, it looks like a simple passage, a thin gap between Iran's southern coastline and the Arabian Peninsula. But the geography of the strait hides a far more complicated reality. Large oil tankers cannot simply sail wherever they want. The water is not uniformly deep, and the massive vessels carrying millions of barrels of crude require carefully designated shipping lanes to pass safely. As a result, nearly all tanker traffic is funneled into just two narrow corridors. Each lane is only about 3 kilometers wide. One lane carries ships entering the Persian Gulf. The other carries ships leaving it, and between them lies a small buffer zone of similar width. In practical terms, the entire global oil artery is squeezed into a space barely wider than a few city streets. For Iran, this creates something military planners immediately recognize: a predictable kill zone. Any vessel traveling through the strait must follow the same narrow path, moving slowly and visibly along routes that are known in advance. There are no alternate routes, no hidden detours. And when a country openly declares that any tanker attempting to pass will be attacked, those narrow lanes suddenly become far more than shipping routes. They become carefully defined targets. The ships moving through the Strait of Hormuz are among the largest vessels on Earth. Oil tankers can stretch hundreds of meters from bow to stern, towering above the water like slow-moving industrial islands. Loaded with crude, they travel cautiously through the narrow lanes, rarely exceeding speeds of 20 to 30 kilometers per hour. This combination, enormous size, slow movement, and predictable routes, creates an ideal target from a military perspective. A tanker navigating the strait cannot maneuver sharply, cannot accelerate quickly, and cannot leave the designated shipping lane without risking running aground. Once it enters the corridor, it is essentially committed to the path. For anyone planning an ambush, that predictability is invaluable. Targets appear exactly where expected at roughly the same speed along routes that have been mapped for decades. Military analysts often describe this situation as a target-rich environment where opportunities for attack are abundant and easy to anticipate. Iranian commanders understand this geography well. Their coastline runs along the northern edge of the strait, placing potential targets within striking distance of land-based weapons. A missile battery hidden along the coast or a drone launched from a nearby airfield would not need to travel far before reaching the shipping lanes. And that proximity creates another problem for anyone trying to defend the strait. The closer the attacker is to the target, the less time the defender has to react. One of Iran's greatest advantages in the Strait of Hormuz is how close the battlefield sits to its own territory. Much of the shipping corridor lies well within range of weapons positioned along Iran's southern coastline. From hidden launch sites scattered across the mountains and coastal plains, missiles or rockets can reach the strait in a matter of moments. These weapons do not need to travel hundreds of kilometers across open ocean. Many are short-range systems, coastal anti-ship missiles, artillery, rockets, and small drones designed specifically for engagements close to land. Some launchers are mobile, capable of moving between concealed positions and firing before quickly disappearing again. For defenders, this proximity dramatically reduces reaction time. In many missile engagements across the world, naval crews might have several minutes to detect a launch, track the incoming threat, and prepare their interceptors. That window allows multiple layers of defense to activate. But inside the Strait of Hormuz, that window can shrink to seconds. A missile launched from nearby coastal terrain might appear on radar only moments before impact. Crews must detect it, identify it, track it, and launch countermeasures almost instantly, all while protecting dozens of civilian ships scattered across the water. And that challenge multiplies when the attack does not come from just one direction. Because the geography of the strait allows Iran to launch weapons from multiple coastal positions at nearly the same time, forcing defenders to react to several threats simultaneously. Missiles and rockets are only part of the equation. In recent years, Iran has also developed one of its most disruptive tools of modern warfare, the Shahid series of attack drones. These small propeller-driven aircraft are designed to fly long distances before diving directly into their targets. Depending on the model, some Shahid drones are believed to have ranges of up to 2,500 kilometers. That means they could reach the Strait of Hormuz from virtually anywhere inside Iran's borders. Airfields, remote launch sites, or even mobile launch trucks scattered across the country could all serve as starting points for attacks. What makes these drones particularly dangerous is not just their range, but their cost. Compared to advanced missiles or fighter aircraft, they are relatively inexpensive to build. Yet, when they strike a target, especially a large oil tanker carrying millions of barrels of crude, the damage can be enormous. A drone carrying a warhead of roughly 100 pounds may cost only tens of thousands of dollars to manufacture. The ship it strikes, however, could be worth hundreds of millions. The oil inside it might be worth just as much. From a strategic perspective, this creates a brutal imbalance. Defenders are forced to use extremely sophisticated and expensive systems to intercept threats that cost a fraction of the price. And when multiple drones approach at once, even advanced defenses can struggle to keep up. The danger in the Strait of Hormuz does not come only from the air or from the shoreline. It can also come directly from the water itself. Over the years, Iran has built a naval doctrine based not on large warships, but on asymmetric tactics, methods designed to overwhelm stronger forces through speed, surprise, and numbers. Instead of relying on massive destroyers or aircraft carriers, Iran operates fleets of small, fast attack boats capable of moving quickly through the narrow waters of the Gulf. These vessels are difficult to detect at long range and can close the distance to larger ships rapidly before launching missiles, rockets, or explosives. In a conflict, these boats would not operate alone. They could appear in coordinated swarms, dozens of small craft approaching from different directions at once. For a large warship or an oil tanker navigating a narrow shipping lane, such an attack could unfold in seconds. Some of these craft might carry missiles. Others might carry explosives intended to detonate alongside a ship's hull. Even small vessels like jet skis or improvised explosive boats could become weapons if they manage to get close enough to a tanker moving slowly through the strait. The concept is simple but effective: overwhelm the defender with too many threats at once. In the confined waters of the Strait of Hormuz, where ships have limited room to maneuver, even a handful of fast-moving attackers can create chaos. If missiles, drones, and attack boats make the Strait of Hormuz dangerous, naval mines make it uncertain. And uncertainty in maritime warfare can be just as powerful as destruction. A single mine drifting beneath the surface has the potential to shut down entire shipping lanes. Naval mines are relatively simple weapons. Some rest on the seabed, waiting for a ship's magnetic signature or pressure wave to pass overhead. Others float just below the surface, tethered to anchors and detonating when a vessel comes too close. Compared to missiles or aircraft, they are cheap and easy to deploy. But clearing them is anything but simple. Once mines are suspected in a waterway, every ship must assume the threat is real. Specialized mine-clearing vessels, helicopters, and underwater drones must sweep the area slowly and methodically, searching for explosives hidden beneath the waves. Even then, the uncertainty lingers. Maritime experts often say that a mined area is never truly considered safe again until every possible device has been located and removed. And in a narrow passage like the Strait of Hormuz, even a few mines could disrupt traffic for days or weeks. For Iran, this creates another powerful asymmetry. A handful of relatively inexpensive weapons could halt billions of dollars in global trade, not necessarily by destroying ships, but simply by making the water too dangerous to cross. All of these threats, missiles, drones, attack boats, and mines, reveal a deeper imbalance built into the conflict. It is not just a battle of weapons. It is a battle of costs. For Iran, disrupting the Strait of Hormuz does not require defeating the U.S. Navy outright. It only requires creating enough damage or uncertainty to make the waterway unusable. Consider the scale of the traffic moving through the strait. In normal times, roughly 3,000 commercial vessels pass through every month. Nearly 100 ships every single day. Most of them are civilian tankers or cargo carriers, not military vessels, and they travel without the defenses that protect warships. For the United States and its allies, defending that many ships would be an enormous challenge. Each tanker would need protection from missiles, drones, mines, or small boat attacks. Warships would have to patrol constantly. Aircraft would have to monitor the coastline, and surveillance systems would need to track potential threats across hundreds of kilometers. Iran, on the other hand, does not need to stop every ship. It only needs a few successful attacks to disrupt the entire system. If even one or two tankers are struck in a short period of time, the psychological effect spreads instantly across global shipping networks. In that moment, the calculation changes. The question is no longer whether the U.S. Navy can defeat Iran militarily. The question becomes whether the world's commercial shipping industry is willing to risk sailing into a war zone. Military strategy does not exist in isolation from politics. Even the most powerful armed forces operate under limits set by public opinion, national leadership, and the willingness of a society to accept losses. In the case of a prolonged conflict in the Strait of Hormuz, those limits become especially important. For the Iranian leadership, the stakes are often framed as existential. The survival of the regime itself is tied to the outcome of such a confrontation. History has shown that governments facing existential threats may tolerate extraordinary levels of damage and hardship if they believe their hold on power is at risk. The United States operates under very different pressures. American military power is vast, but it is also closely tied to domestic support. Public opinion can shift quickly when conflicts lead to casualties, especially in wars that are not widely perceived as essential to national survival. This difference in tolerance can influence strategic calculations on both sides. Iran may be willing to endure significant destruction if it believes that even limited success, such as disrupting global shipping or damaging a U.S. warship, could shift the political balance in Washington. In other words, the battlefield in the Strait of Hormuz is not only defined by missiles and ships. It is also shaped by how long each side believes the other is willing to keep fighting. Yet in the end, the greatest obstacle to reopening the Strait of Hormuz might not be missiles, mines, or warships at all. It might be something far less dramatic: insurance. Commercial shipping companies operate in a world defined by risk calculations. Every tanker that sails through the strait carries not only millions of barrels of oil, but also enormous financial liability. If that ship is damaged or destroyed, the losses can reach hundreds of millions of dollars. Under normal conditions, insurance companies cover that risk. But when a shipping lane becomes an active war zone, the calculations change quickly. Insurance providers may increase premiums dramatically, restrict coverage, or refuse to insure voyages through the area entirely. Once that happens, the flow of ships can stop almost overnight. Tanker captains may be willing to take the risk, but the companies that own the vessels and the insurers that underwrite them are far less willing to gamble on a route where missiles or mines could appear at any moment. This is why in many crises involving the Strait of Hormuz, Ships are not stuck because they physically cannot pass through. They are stuck because no one wants to take the financial risk of trying. For the United States to truly reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the mission would require far more than escorting a few tankers through the shipping lanes. Naval patrols alone cannot eliminate the threats that originate from land, air, and hidden positions along the coastline. To create a passage that commercial ships actually trust, the United States would have to dismantle much of Iran's ability to strike the strait at all. That means targeting missile launch sites scattered across the Iranian coast. It means destroying drone production facilities and launch bases capable of sending Shahid drones toward the shipping lanes. It would likely involve striking naval bases, storage depots for mines, and the small craft used in swarm attacks. Each of those objectives requires sustained military operations, not a brief escort mission. Airstrikes would need to hit launchers and stockpiles. Intelligence assets would have to track mobile missile units moving through mountainous terrain. Naval forces would be tasked with clearing mines and protecting minesweeping vessels while they worked. Even then, the risk would not disappear overnight. Iran's ability to hide weapons, relocate launchers, or deploy new mines means that threats could reappear at any moment. Establishing real security in the Strait would take time, potentially weeks of continued operations. And during that time, American warships, aircraft, and sailors would remain within range of Iranian weapons operating directly in the line of enemy fire. This is the central paradox of the Strait of Hormuz. Controlling it requires overwhelming military strength, constant surveillance, and weeks, perhaps months, of sustained operations. But disrupting it requires far less. Iran does not actually need to dominate the strait to shut it down. It does not need to defeat the U.S. Navy in open battle or control the shipping lanes with warships. All it has to do is make the waterway too dangerous to use. A few drones striking tankers, a handful of mines scattered across the shipping corridor, a missile launched from the coastline that finds its target once or twice. Each individual incident might seem small in military terms, but the effect on global commerce can be enormous. Because the tankers waiting outside the strait are not stopped by force alone. They are stopped by risk. Captains, shipping companies, and insurers all reach the same conclusion. If the passage is too dangerous, the safest decision is simply not to enter. And that is why one of the most important waterways on Earth can become paralyzed so quickly. Not because Iran can control it, but because it can make the cost of using it unbearably high. In the end, the Strait of Hormuz reminds us of a fundamental truth about modern conflict. Sometimes the most powerful navy in the world does not lose control of a battlefield. Sometimes the battlefield simply becomes too dangerous for anyone to enter.